David Mulroney is a former Canadian ambassador to China. We have reached him in Toronto. Mr. Mulroney, good to see you again. Thanks for taking time to speak with me.
Great to speak with you, Peter.
What's your reaction to this move by Canada to arrest the CFO of Huawei on behalf of the United States, as it turns out?
It's a major development. A Chinese commentator likened it to arresting the COO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg, in Beijing. It's that big. The Madam Meng, who's been arrested, is the vice chair of Huawei, the major telecoms company. She's the daughter of the founder. She's a very high-profile person in China. So this is a big deal.
Okay, the Prime Minister says he had a few days' notice that the arrest would happen, but of course insists there was no political interference. And I guess I'm wondering now, what kind of retaliation from the Chinese could that open us up to?
Well, I think we can expect some form of retaliation from the Chinese. They're clearly furious. They're probably going to wait to see what happens with the extradition request. We've already heard from Chinese diplomats in Canada who've called this a human rights violation. But I think they're waiting to see what happens, because the big issue for them is, if this ends up with Madam Meng going to the United States, it's a much bigger issue. The arrest happened just the very day that President Trump and President Xi Jinping of China were sitting down to declare truce in the trade war. So this could reopen that. In the meantime, if she is extradited, we can expect a real chill in Canada-China relations. We can expect that the Chinese public via the internet are going to be outraged. And we can probably expect some form of tit-for-tat retaliation against Canadians. We've seen this before with the Chinese. They play rough.
Okay, so and you've said that before. When they play rough, what could that mean?
Well, the one example I think back to, and again, this hasn't been proved, is that in 2014 we sent a man named Su Bin, who was a aerospace specialist in Canada. We sent him to the U.S. On grounds that they were worried he was stealing secrets related to the F-35 fighter. And indeed, he did confess. He's serving prison time in the U.S. The Chinese were furious. A few months after that, a Canadian couple called the Garretts, who lived up in North China, they had a cafe there by the North Korean border, were arrested on allegations of spying. It didn't seem to make any sense, but they were held for many months. In fact, Mr. Garrett was held for something like 19 months. And it seemed that this was a form of retaliation. Whether that would happen again, I don't know, but you have to be prepared for these things.
I mean, does this put Canada right in the middle of this fight now between this trade fight between the United States and China? What does that, what are the consequences of that for Canada?
Well, this is something that has been brewing for us for some time. They talk about the Five Eyes, the intelligence community that includes the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and Britain. Three of the members of the Five Eyes, the US, Australia, New Zealand, have already decided to basically banish Huawei. Canada and Britain were outliers. Now Britain is looking more squeamish about dealing with Huawei, who played a major role in their telecoms infrastructure, and we've got a major decision to make. So there was no way we were going to escape some form of controversy. But yes, to the extent that this also plays into the US-China trade war, we're right in the middle of things. And let's not forget that it may also possibly be related to violations of sanctions with Iran. So this is a big, messy bundle of things, and we're at the center of it.
Yeah, let me pick up on that. The U.S. says sort of the implied reason that she's been arrested, allegedly for trying to, as you say, evade the U.S. sanctions against Iran. Is that credible to you, or is this, do you think, more connected to concerns about Huawei and the allegation there is that it's a front for Chinese state spying?
The Americans have been investigating the potential that Chinese companies, including Huawei, have violated the Iran sanctions for some time. A smaller but very important Chinese telecoms company, ZTE, has paid a couple of fines in the U.S. in relation to this. And I think there was a growing sense, and certainly in the Trump administration, that the Chinese were basically being given the option of paying off the Americans to evade sanctions. Pay a couple $100 million and take a slap on the wrists. China's got a lot of money; they can do that for a long time. It may signal what so often is the case, that the bluster coming from Washington and from President Trump is backed up by a hard reality. they're going to get really tough with the Chinese, and that's going to mean that the global technology trade, which has major Chinese players, is going to get upended.
How does this complicate the Trudeau government's efforts to try and diversify trade and sort of build a deeper economic relationship with China? Did this just throw a wrench in the whole thing?
It should, but again, this has been coming for some time. We're having to work out a relationship with a country that offers as many benefits, but also in many respects poses a threat to us, and that's always going to be complicated. The Chinese like to convey the idea that doing a trade agreement with them is a favor they confer upon Canada, and we have to be on our best behavior to get the benefits of that. They want to do a deal as much as we do, or they should, and if they don't, we won't do a deal. So we have to stiffen our spines and accept the fact that just as we're able to talk trade with them, we also have to do our duty when it comes to upholding an international sanctions regime on a country like Iran. It's going to be difficult. There will probably be a deep freeze with the Chinese, and high-level visits and exchanges. The ability to talk about free trade will be put in the icebox for a while, but we're going to have to live with that. That's the price of dealing with a country like China. The alternative, not picking up somebody that the Americans, if this is the case, were interested in relation to Iran sanctions, carries consequences too. We're exiting a risk-free world and entering one that has lots of risks, and risks we're going to have to learn to live with.
Okay, let me finish on this with you, and it is connected perhaps. Look, House of Commons Foreign Affairs Committee was scheduled to meet today, in fact, with the Chinese ambassador to Canada and 4 visiting members of the National People's Congress of China, their legislature. A closed-door meeting of the committee. The Chinese apparently canceled it yesterday, and I wonder if maybe this arrest had something to do with that. But what do you think of Canadian parliamentarians holding closed-door meetings with the Chinese?
Well, I described this as a dumb idea and a bad idea. A bad idea on 2 counts. One, the Parliament of Canada should be using every opportunity to illustrate to the Chinese what it's like to operate in a democracy. And in a democracy, we hold these hearings in public, and we allow the media to be present, and the Canadian public gets to hear what's going on. The second thing is, Parliament doesn't negotiate with China. The administration, the executive branch does, through the government and its ministries. It's a really bad idea to allow the Chinese to kind of negotiate behind closed doors with Parliament. They're experts at divide and conquer, and I think they'd love to generate a little bit of political pressure for their demands. So it was a bad idea to begin with, and I suspect the cancellation had something to do with concerns about the impending Huawei arrest.
All right. David Mulroney, appreciate your time, sir. Good to talk to you. We'll talk again.
Great. Thank you very much.